Hey everybody, how's it going? So today I want to discuss something. I don't usually delve much into politics on this channel because it's a cesspool. It always winds up being a cesspool. What people typically tend to do is not respond to what you say or what you think, but what they think you said or what they think you think. And that's just not really conducive to it. The internet is not conducive to these types of discussions versus having them in person. That being said, this is aggravating enough. I can't help myself. So this is about our governor, Mr. Andrew Cuomo. So he had a mandate. He has certain mandates regarding COVID, and honestly, I'm not really necessarily against them. Just some basic common sense things. If you're having people over for Thanksgiving, it may be best to not have large groups of people in a small confined home that are all coming from different areas, different ages, and so on and so forth, because that's pretty much the worst case scenario for spreading a disease. I am not a COVID denier. I'm not someone who doesn't take it seriously. I think people should be wearing masks in enclosed spaces. I think people should be cleaning services. I think people should be taking it seriously. I believe it exists. At the same time, some of the countermeasures taken, I don't understand how these countermeasures can be enforced without it seeming like you're living in a dictatorship. I mentioned earlier in the year when there was a tip line where if people were not properly social distancing, you could send pictures, and then I don't know the police is supposed to come over and like break it up because you were 4 feet apart instead of 6 feet apart while you were talking. This is the kind of thing where you had lots of true, genuine New York City patriots that love this city and love this country send in large barrages of dick pics and random crap, or flooding the line so that they could not actually go ahead and enforce this, which is, again, in my opinion, the true patriots thing to do. Because who the fuck wants to live in a city where, again, I understand the COVID restrictions, but where you have some dickheads say they're 4 feet apart instead of 6 feet apart. Get him, officer! Yeah, I can completely understand the science behind it, while also simultaneously understanding that it is going to be the worst elements of society that are going to take advantage of this to get each other in trouble. Now, when it comes to what's going on here with Thanksgiving, there are certain regulations and rules put in place that, in my opinion, are not really supposed to be enforced by the police. It's really supposed to be something where here are our guidelines and best practices. Listen, you're all adults. We're not the CCP. We cannot 110% enforce this, but can you please live up to it? Which is for Thanksgiving dinner, can you limit it to like 10 people or less just for now because of what's going on with COVID? And there were some sheriffs that said, listen, I get where you're coming from, but this really does seem non-enforceable. And Cuomo's response to this was, you don't have a right to pick laws that you think you will enforce, and you don't enforce laws that you don't agree with, Governor Cuomo said. That's not a law enforcement officer. That's a dictator. So you're not a law enforcement officer. So here what you have is the governor saying to the police, if you don't want to enforce laws regarding how many people can get together in their own house for Thanksgiving dinner, you're a dictator. Now, you have to understand what is necessary to enforce this law. You would need to, in some way, shape, or form, spy on the GPSs of phones so that you could see if there's a cluster of more than 10 people within a space that would be defined as a house. That's a bit police state. You would have to peek in the windows or break into the homes in order to see if there's more than 10 people in the home. You would have to have people tattling on each other and saying, well, I saw 15 people walk into that house and only one walk out, and I have security footage of it, that then bring it to the police so that they can then go into that person's house without a warrant, because you're not going to have time to get a warrant in order to enforce this and have them leave. While I completely understand and respect the request, which is don't have large groups of people together for Thanksgiving, and trust me, I'm not doing it either. Mostly because I'm just not a fan of people. I usually don't get together for Thanksgiving anyway, so that's not really much of a change for me. But from the health perspective, I understand and I respect it. I am completely in agreement with the police officers here that are saying that this is ridiculous. And I think that it's a particularly interesting choice of words from the governor to say that the police officer refusing to peek in people's windows or break into their homes to enforce this law is a dictator, not the governor that wants them to do this. Because how else are you going to tell if a house has 15 people in it instead of 10. This is something where you would need to have officers stationed outside of every single person's home, counting who walks in or out, or, just knocking on the doors and seeing who's in the home. There's not really any way around this. So This is a great example of projection here, where the officers refusing to follow the orders of the actual dictator, Andrew Cuomo, are being called dictators by the dictator, Andrew Cuomo. I just like to read some of this article here so you can get an idea of it directly from them. The governor is limiting gatherings to 10 people, including on Thanksgiving Day. The imposed rule by Cuomo took effect on Friday, and it didn't take long for sheriffs across the state to balk at the enforcement demand by the governor. An upstate sheriff said that he would not enforce it, saying that he would never interfere with the great tradition of Thanksgiving dinner. Another sheriff in the southern part of the state said his deputies would not be peeking in windows. The governor has responded by dismissing those serious concerns on the part of local law enforcement, saying law enforcement officers don't get to pick and choose which laws they will enforce. I find that comment ironic and disingenuous since the governor has directed that his own 5,000 state police not enforce his own executive order. It is unenforceable, said Steve McLaughlin, going to mispronounce that because I'm a shitty New Yorker, county executive, stating that he believes it's unconstitutional, as pretty much every sheriff I've spoken to. The defiance did not sit well with Cuomo. So in a statement on Monday, the Sheriff's Association pushed back against the governor's comments. It says agencies have responded to thousands of complaints since the onset of the pandemic, and it believes the best approach is to educate the public about health mandates and encourage that they be followed. It argues that the governor's instructions can't be practically enforced and that he should be encouraging citizens to voluntarily follow health officials' guidance. We do not know if the governor's limit on home gatherings to 10 individuals is the right number or not. That is a decision for science to make, not us. We do know, however, that the governor has attempted to foist upon local law enforcement an impossible task. How are officers to know, without violating citizens' right to privacy and other constitutional rights, how many people are in the home? How are they to determine if the family gathering is to be deemed essential or non-essential? If 12 people normally reside in the home, are the officers to order 2 of them to move out? If 11 individuals are found to be present in the home, who is to be charged with violating the order? All 11 or just the last guest to arrive? Or is it only the homeowner who is in violation? Are officers really supposed to arrest guests who don't stay 6 feet apart or who fail to have their face masks on during dinner? All of those are serious questions which make it impossible for law enforcement to know how to legally enforce the governor's order. These are questions that could have been addressed if we had a functioning state legislature creating clear and enforceable laws after input from those who would be impacted by them. Instead, we are faced with an unenforceable dictate issued without any consultation with law enforcement or the public as to enforceability. And this is something that is just, in my opinion, ridiculous. You have the police, a group of people who have, again, I'm going to get in a bunch of shit for this from both sides, but, there's someone selling Lucy cigarettes, and he argues with the police about it. He gets choked out and killed. Police will do that. You have non-peaceful protests where people are destroying shit. Trust me, I watched all those, and I'm aware of them. I'm not going to get media. A lot of media pretended that didn't happen. But you also had peaceful protests that were actually peaceful. And then the police did lots of shit that you could find on video online. There's tons of videos of actual peaceful protests getting royally fucked up by the police. They're totally fine to do that. But when they finally draw a line in the sand and say, listen, I know we're New York police, but there's just some things that we're not going to do. I'm not enforcing that law. It is not the person who created the unenforceable law that is a dictator. It is the policeman that chooses not to follow those orders that is being called the dictator. Again, and I know I'm going to get a bunch of shit in my comments for this because it's going to be that, if you move to my state, just keep your voting habits with you. That often come from ideologically possessed people that choose to judge individuals not based on the choices they make or based on their belief systems, but rather on their geographic location, who would ignore the fact that for, I think, the entire year of 2017 and 18, I had a little banner on the bottom of my videos that said, consider Larry Sharpe. Not vote for Larry Sharpe. I don't have the right, as someone you view, to tell you how you should vote. I just suggest that you consider the choice for governor that was not a dictator. But sadly, he got less than 2% of the vote because, I don't know. I don't know what drives people's voting choices, and I sincerely hope that people will keep things like this in mind, that our governor acts like a dictator. And then when people say, I am not going to follow the rules of a tyrant, then he calls them the dictator. And again, I'm 100% agreeing with the fact that during a pandemic, it's probably not a good idea to invite a lot of your elderly family members over from all over the country and have 20 or 30 people in one household in a small enclosed area. Because let's face it, if you've seen what house prices are in New York, average person here does not have a mansion. There's no social distancing happening there. I agree with the idea. However, the method of enforcement here, the police are saying, listen, this is not something we find to be enforceable or think we can enforce, so we're not enforcing it. And a lot of the protests that we've had this year appear to be sending a message that heavy-handed policing or over-enforcement of particular laws tends to just go poorly. There tends to be this snowball down the hill effect that winds up going out of control. Let's have less of that. And Cuomo really seems tone deaf to the message of just stop using the police for everything. You know, one area where the defund the police people would discuss is we don't want to get rid of the police. There are the abolish the police people, but a lot of the defund the police people are not saying get rid of the police. Let's just not have them do everything. There's certain things a social worker should do, certain things a mental health professional should do, certain things that should be handled by a guidance counselor, and so on and so forth. And part of that message might be that just maybe the police are not the people to be enforcing by force, by gun, by baton, how many people should be in a house for Thanksgiving dinner and how to deal with that if you have more than 10 people in a house for Thanksgiving dinner. I think it's a bad idea to have more than 10 people in a house for Thanksgiving dinner during COVID. I genuinely do. I also think that having the police enforce this without having answers to all of these very excellent questions that are highlighted in this article that I will link to down below will have considerably worse societal consequences than whatever happens with COVID after Thanksgiving. You let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now.